Welcome to Conscious I, living in authentic connection and harmony with self, others, and the world, featuring Ravi and Savitri.
Good morning, Savitri.
Good morning, Ravi. How are you today?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag of emotions. I feel good. I feel grateful. I feel, happy in my life and content in my life. But then I also feel a lot of distress and sickness and sadness for what I see happening in our country and in the world at large. There's energies that are impacting us globally, but certainly some things that have been making the big headlines recently, as we're all aware, have been incredibly, really, truly, I mean, soul distressing. They really hit deeply. So it's that, which we've talked about before. I feel like I'm in a place where, I'm just holding space for both of those things at the same time and just trying to take care of myself and, do the little things that matter to me so that I can do the bigger things as they arise. Well, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, it's just really, we've been having one hit every time we turn around, pretty much at least once a day, many times more than once a day, depending on what we choose to follow and bring ourselves into connection to hear the information that's happening. I agree with you. It has been a real challenging week, and in addition, the energies in the universe are also having quite a bit of intensity. When we talked in our last episode, I believe, about New Year's, and we saw that we had the planetary family in Sagittarius and lots of fire, and we see what some of that has brought. Now the planets have moved, and they've all moved into Capricorn right now, which is a place to make some sense of what it is that's been happening. So we move from fire to earth, where we're getting a little more grounded and starting to uncover the details a bit, and see just where do they fit, what happens. And I think that helps all of us and I'll just put myself into this category, who happen to be in a state of grief and trauma. And I've heard from quite a few people, and just following some of the groups that work with grief and anxiety and depression are finding that people are just overflowing, and the number of comments and the quality of the comments and the personal things that people have shared with me, we are full. A lot of us are over capacity. So I just wanted to bring that into recognition as we start having more dialogue today, knowing that the undercurrent is like an undertow. If anybody's been near the ocean, when they say don't go in, the undertow is really strong, you may have gone in anyway and found out exactly what that is, and they're right. It's pretty strong. And I feel like our cultural energy right now, and some of the energy coming from the sun, it's been really dynamic as well. We have volcanoes and earthquakes that are in the almost record numbers that have been occurring for the last year or year and a half. We're all susceptible to that energy. So when I mentioned that the family has planetary family has moved from Sagittarius, that spiritual learning, knowing, kind of organized dogma way of looking at life, has been on fire and now moved to Capricorn. We have a lot to learn yet. We have a lot of knowing and understanding about all the perceptions, perspectives, and facts about different events that are occurring. Because just like anything else, 3 or 4 people can see the very same event and they'll all tell you something slightly different. And with the events being as intense and active, the energies of having our streets disrupted, people feeling unsafe leaving their homes, people feeling unsafe in their homes,
people being unsafe on the streets and in their homes. We've definitely moved from, into the action of the energies, the need to act. And I think through today's conversation, we'll be able to see why some of this is occurring now, and hopefully give some hope as to what we can do, because this is new for us, but it's not new. And we've been privileged to live through our lifetimes here, at least most of us in this country, and many of us around the world, but not all. But especially here in this country, we've been privileged to live out our lives with relatively little disruption. If you're a white person, mostly. I mean, there's certainly the intersectionality of different cultures and groups in our country that have felt that undertow that you were speaking of a lot more strongly than others. And now it's coming to that fever pitch, and it's impacting more of us, and that makes more of us tune in and pay attention. I know a lot of people in different realms have been talking about the 3D 5D split, and whatever your thoughts are on that, I think we can agree that we are seeing a very clear distinction in the frequencies that people are experiencing, which is essentially almost experiencing a different reality. So that 3D 5D split, you're either coming from a place of, I would call it the mind, the ego mind, where you're seeing things very black and white. It's very material. Your perception is based off of more of the ego identity, versus the 5D, where there's a higher frequency and vibration, where you see more connection, more unification, more of the connections between impacts, pattern recognition. And it's like living in 2 different realities.
It is different realities, just like I mentioned, having 3 or 5 people see the same event and their realities are all different.
Yes. So I think, many are attributing that to the 3D 5D split, and whatever you want to call it, or whatever you attribute that to, I think that it's pretty fair to see we're all really seeing that divide in real time.
Yes, we really are. And when we see it activated, I mentioned when we met last about Mars being in Sagittarius with the family and being the activator in that environment. I think we all can surmise that with Sagittarius being kind of the rule-based, religion-oriented sign, as well as being the guru for the teacher, uh, it was fairly intense. So I'll let everyone kind of digest that a little bit in your own way and come to your own conclusions. The thing about everything happening in Capricorn right now is that the sun is in such a close proximity to all the other planets, and the sun is a little bit not quite as comfortable in Capricorn because it's a fire sign. It was happy in Sagittarius. And with that being said, that gives the other planets a different way of looking at what's going on and sending the energies to the Earth. So Venus is combust and Mercury is combust. So those two are basically quiet, looking for the desires to make everyone feel good for Venus, coming to compromise and understanding, building a relationship that's sustainable and has equanimity among all of us. Maybe not as much right now because the sun is over bright and taking the light, shielding the light of the others. Mercury has been quiet as well. Being combust, Mercury is about exploring answers and expressing those, communicating those. And again, the sun, the light of the sun is overpowering that. So we're having some different ways of expression of these energies right now. And, you know, I just want to say I took a look at the new moons for the next couple of months. And this family group is going to move as a unit through the zodiac. So we started in Sagittarius, where last year in December, there wasn't so much going on. Mars, Sun, and Moon was in Sagittarius. By the time we hit January 1, they were all in there with the Sun. And now everyone has moved to Capricorn, and in February at the new moon, everyone is going to be moving into Aquarius, which is the collective. So it's like we got fired up in Sagittarius, then we move into Capricorn where we like look at the details and start getting pragmatic and practical and looking where things work and where they don't work. And then we move into the collective. The entire stellium, that planetary family, moves in, and it gets a little closer to Saturn because Saturn's still in Pisces. We see that just within the next couple months, this integrated energy and where the planets are ebbing and flowing with their strengths and weaknesses, and it's very uneven in that way. We're moving from fire to earth to air in the collective. So the next couple months can be really interesting, I think, to watch how these dynamics play out.
And I know I want to circle back to those more personal planets in a moment, but we also want to look a little bit today into Neptune and Uranus and what they're doing, because these outer planets are traditionally considered to be more those that affect the collective. Mm-hmm. They're so far out there, and their transits take so long that we can see. I think it's a little harder to notice their cycles unless you're paying attention. So the Neptune transit is 165 years, mm-hmm. and the Uranus transit is 84 years. I'm curious to know, because I didn't check this, but I think you did, where those planets are according to the Vedic chart.
Mm-hmm. I
now.
did, actually. Yeah. And one thing that takes it forward just one more step is that the stellium doesn't quit at Aquarius. It moves into Pisces as well. And when it does, it will be joining Saturn and Neptune. And Neptune is in Pisces from the sidereal Vedic perspective or mathematical perspective. And then Uranus is in Taurus. And Pluto is right now in Capricorn with the rest of the family. So Pluto is one that's often providing that groundwork for what the culture is experiencing. It can be radical, massive change, I believe, and also supports the nodes because the nodes have a similar energy, a little more dynamic and a little closer to us because of the change pattern in the nodes. But Pluto has a way of blowing things up, so to speak, or making radical changes. So what did you find out about these three as far as what we're talking about with the environment that we're living in?
Well, so the tropical calendar is admittedly, right, it's different. So the tropical calendar has Neptune transiting into Aries March 2025 through March 2039. It still is at approximately 29 degrees Pisces as of the 12th, making its transition into Aries, and currently is retrograde. Now, this planet is known for deep transformation on ideology. It's related to social upheaval and broader redefinition of cultural and national identities. If we look at the last transit, 1861 to 1875, we had the American Civil War happening. So there were, of course, revolutionary actions happening at that time. Also, the abolition of slavery. As far as technological and artistic innovation, it was the invention of the kineograph, which was the little flip book that animated characters and was the precursor to moving pictures. And when we think about Neptune making this transit, there is also the technological changes, which we see a lot of technological advances happening now with data centers, AI. AI and data centers is causing a lot of concern that will be managed appropriately, because not only is it an impact on the environment using a ton of water and causing a lot of heat, there's so much that can happen socially as far as privacy and the use of AI. It's, of course, hard to tell. I see people falling for the most absurd AI images and videos on social media platforms, and you think, oh, that's scary. You didn't clock that. But then every once in a while I'm watching a video and you get that feeling and you're like, this is a little sus. And is it, they're getting really good. But sometimes, I have to watch myself getting duped from those AI images and videos because they're getting good.
I just did yesterday, actually. I was watching a news outlet and saw something else that was relevant to what I was watching. And I watched it and I thought, oh, you're kidding me. And it was really exotic as far as being out of the norm. But at the same time was plausible. I mean, it was very plausible, and it was built on a particular perspective that's very vibrant right now in our culture. And I'm like, oh, I need to send this to people. Then I took it all out because when I did, I realized, wait a minute, that it just didn't feel right. And when I went back and looked a little deeper, I'm like, oh, right. Yeah,
We're
that was
required to really take extra steps. And
mhm,
just all it takes is just a little dive. You know, you don't have to dive too deeply, but
mm-mm,
it does require that you go beyond the surface and you have to take that extra step sometimes. So those of us even who have been kind of, you know, scoffing at those who aren't picking, you know, aren't clocking that AI, they're not picking up on it right away, kind of have to even take a look at ourselves a little
mhm,
more closely.
mhm,
Some other interesting things I thought that occurred in the last transit of Neptune from Pisces to Aries, and around that time. And again, these aren't very definitive transits. It's not like on this date, Pisces, you know, Neptune moves from Pisces into Aries. So just keep in mind, listeners, that these energies can be felt long before and long after, especially depending on how what your placements are and how sensitive you are to the energies at
mhm,
hand. But Les Miserables was written in 1862 during the last transit. Crime and Punishment, War and Peace also came out of the last transit, and the rise of Impressionism artistically. So I think when we look at these transits and how they impact us culturally and socially, it's very easy to focus on the scary stuff that was going on and that we see happening now. But keep in mind, there were creative movements happening as well.
mhm,
And it's, well, like we've said before, these energies don't determine the outcome or what will happen, but they give us an opportunity to think and act intentionally of how we're going to behave and how we're going to continue to believe throughout these transits. So a shift from Pisces into Aries is, you know, moving from idealism to action. So Pisces, you know, that watery, very dreamy state.
mhm,
And as it moves into Aries, we're going to have to take a little more action. Um, and there's, you know, Neptune with illusion, uh, you know, creating kind of that more of a fuzzy picture. We're going to move into a clearer state. Um, and we get to reimagine our identity of who we want to be, not just on an individual level, but on the collective level as well. And we get to choose, if we want to choose, to shift toward new forms of expression. And we can embrace, you know, that again, we've talked a lot about the spectrum of, you know, we can hold it all here on this planet and this existence. So where do you want to position yourself on that spectrum? And reimagining your identity with a focus on individual rights, autonomy, and personal empowerment. How you choose to use this energy for yourself will impact what shows up in the collective. That was, those were my meanderings on the Neptune to Pisces transit. This cycle is known for reshaping societal structures, which I think we
mhm,
can clearly see going on. It's a movement from old systems, just like the abolition of slavery, and we've got some systems currently that are oppressive and aren't beneficial to the all in the collective equally or equitably. So we're moving from old systems toward radical new beginnings, and this can manifest as fervent nationalism and war-related disillusionment, which was shown through the Civil War, I think, which we can see now. You know, we've got technocrats and billionaires that are impacting our governmental structures. So those are the parallels of
yeah,
the last transit. to the current transit that we're experiencing.
A lot of that supports what's happening between the stellium or the planetary family moving from Sagittarius to Capricorn, moving from that dogmatic kind of vibrant way of being into one of a little bit more pragmatism and ability to be able to create something, manifest something out of that energy, out of that heat, out of that fire. And in some ways, it's kind of going the other way, but Aries is more action oriented in a different way than the fire of Sagittarius. And the stellium or the planetary family that's in Capricorn right now are all in Uttara Ashada. And they are coming into a location of the sky where there's like a sub-nakshatra there. So that sub-nakshatra is called Abhijit. And so with that movement, we're getting the opportunity to be victorious. Abhijit is about, it represents the victory over darkness, the victory over what is historically the good versus evil battles, where the plans are put in place, they're activated, and then we move into deep reflection and days of silence. And the way that the new moon is arriving right now, we're coming into a rather auspicious time. So if there's something in our lives over this weekend that we would like to bring in, maybe a special intention or something along a personal line or even along a collective line, this weekend is activated in a way that brings that forward to us. So we're finding that the actions of all the personal planets are uniting and taking turns being leaders and coming out in a measured way to activate some energies for us here on Earth. And I like what you mentioned again, because we both have been very strongly communicating that the astrological energies provide an opportunity for us to make choices because we have free will. And so we have this energetic grounding, or in the case of Pisces, river underneath us that we flow on, and it flows through and around us. It's much like someone says, here's an opportunity for you to do this. Oh, by the way, here's another one.
Right.
And we get the choice to do that. Same thing happens if it's an opportunity that maybe we don't want. Maybe it's an event that causes distress. We have a choice around that too. We don't always have to be a victim of the circumstances around us. Yes, maybe to some extent our physical forms can, but internally we can hold ourselves in a way to keep that equanimity, keep that sense of calm. It's a real struggle, I will admit, but it's an ideal that we can look forward to and maybe bring into our lives a little bit more.
And, again, these all play together, and there's so many at play right now that are just handing us the choice to do something. We can make the same mistakes of the past, or we can choose to do something differently. Mm-hmm. Looking at the Uranus, at least from the tropical aspect, moving from Aries into Taurus, this is an 84-year transit, and the last transit from from Aries into Taurus, 1935 to 1942-ish, we were experiencing the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl famine, the rise of autocrats. We had Mussolini and Hitler involved in this era, and it was the outbreak of World War II. And Uranus was only discovered in 1781, so that's interesting, but it is a harbinger of a period of financial, structural, and agricultural crisis alongside technological, social, and economic destruction. Don't know if that sounds familiar to anyone or everyone, but so when we think again, AI, technology disruption, crypto, we've got this rise of financial revolution. We have been experiencing drought and water issues related to AI data centers and other influences. I mean, we're seeing that across the nation. And I know that just locally, recently, residents were asked to reduce or conserve water. So I think we look at the transit also from Taurus to Gemini, Uranus transiting from Taurus to Gemini, because April of 2026 will complete, at least tropically, this transit, Aries to Taurus. So the last Taurus to Gemini transit, we had World War II going on. It was 1941 to 1942-ish. So World War II, the birth of the nuclear age, the splitting of the atom, the creation of the United Nations, the partition of India and Pakistan, and we had an ideological conflict with the Cold War. So you can go back and just, you can go back another 84 years, 1941 to 1948. We had the first general purpose computers. Colossus was one of them. Mass media was growing, often used for wartime propaganda. Transportation developed with jet engines, helicopters, and the innovation of the scooter. So you can go back every 84 years and find these markers of these transits. And so it begs the question, how can we say with confidence history repeats itself and then question astrology?
Exactly. I agree. Yeah. It's interesting you should mention that transit for Uranus on the 20th of this month. Saturn has a special aspect where from a Vedic standpoint now. So we're talking about where Uranus is in the Vedic chart, which is Taurus, and their third house from Saturn is 100% of the aspect of Saturn. And so with Saturn being very restrictive and constraining and slowing things down, and Uranus being extremely sudden in its activation of different energies, from a Vedic standpoint, having Uranus in Taurus, which is a place in the Earth's chart, it would be the second house, and that is the house of values and earthy, home-based sensations. And so that sudden change that you were talking about in the previous transits would indicate that perhaps we have some of that happening as well. So sudden changes in power, in distribution of structures around the world, and that this particular aspect is going to not just be one day. It'll be several weeks where Saturn and Uranus are in that direct aspect. And so there may be some interesting events, not just sociologically, but also from an earth standpoint, maybe more volcanoes, more earthquakes, that type of thing. And I like something that you mentioned earlier that I think from the outer planets helps blend what the experience is in the two methods. Vedic, of course, is looking mathematically exactly where those planets are. And so that's real world information. The energies around that, though, because they are so distant from Earth, they expand outward. So they start and then they move out into the fabric of the cosmos. The personal planets have that very same way of being. The energies start in a focused way and move outward. They radiate. And so when we have the planets that are that distant, often there's an overlap in the two methods where the Vedic and the tropical have similar energetics coming from all of the planets, but specifically we're talking about the outer planets today a little more. And so there is an ambience there where there not only is one sign impacted, but two signs are impacted. And when that happens, we're seeing that Neptune experience of being dreamy and kind of confused and full of Maya illusion and trying to sort things out. Well, that's very Piscean, which is the Vedic placement of Neptune right now. And then moving into Aries, as you talked about, with all of the historical things that have happened in the past when that's occurred, we're still getting that activation, but we're trying to work through the confusion. And in March, when the rest of the planetary family joins Saturn and the last degrees of Neptune in Pisces, we'll be feeling a lot of that ambience where each of the planets are going to have their own Maya, their own rate of confusion and trying to understand, and they'll be looking to each other to either harness each other's energies, take each other's energies and utilize it to make understanding, or there'll be dissonance, like two motorboats in the water, right? Their wakes are choppy. Side by side, their wakes align. So that'll be interesting to watch that, especially with Rahu and Ketu in the mix as well, because that planetary family is going to be moving into Aquarius, and that's where Rahu is right now too. So we have to add the North Node to that ambience as well. So the eclipses.
Oh my gosh. I was going to mention that too because, we talked about the last solar eclipse and then the only place that wasn't visible was here, and the next big solar eclipse coming up in August. Where is the visibility going to be? Iceland, Greenland. There's some weird, energies at play there. And I think we'll talk about that more. But yeah, I'm glad that we talked about these outer planets today. We don't talk about them a lot in Vedic astrology, but I think, and it's for anybody who's listening, if this sounds overwhelming or feels overwhelming, and it feels like we're at the mercy of these energies, these again are just influences, and to understand these layers of energy that we're under right now, let that just be a guide. Right. Tune in. Something, Savitri, that, and I maybe have mentioned this before, maybe I haven't too. So I know I've mentioned it between us. I don't know if our listeners have heard it before, but when I first hit Sati Sati, which was, that my moon returning to my Saturn placement, Saturn returning to my moon. Sorry, right. Said that backwards, right? So we've got Saturn coming back over, lighting up my moon, and anybody who's familiar with the Saturn return or that Sati Sati, it's a time of hard knocks, and you've got to work through your karmic lessons that are coming up for you, and you've got to choose how you're going to respond to them. Are you going to do that in the way that creates more karma, or are you going to choose the path of dharma and resolve that karma so that it can, you can burn through it for once and for all? And I was going through that incredibly difficult time, and you encouraged me to just go out and sit. Because I was like, Saturn and me, ooh, yeah, we're not buddies. Like, I wanted to fight Saturn pretty hardcore. And your advice was to go sit out under the planets and just really contemplate and communicate and make friends with Saturn. And I literally did that. We had an alignment of the planets, and I could, we could see quite a few of them all lined up at the time. And that changed me. That changed my life and my perspective and my relationship with Saturn, but more importantly, my relationship with myself.
Right.
And so that's what I just want to encourage anybody who's listening to this and feels overwhelmed, and if this energy feels oppressive, and if you don't know what to do, maybe just spend an evening, go outside and look up at the sky and just reflect. And just be open to the communication of their energies, and do whatever feels right for you, whatever ritual feels right to you. If that's maybe going in and journaling for a bit, or doing some gentle movement or some breath work, and allow that energy to work through you. Because it's not something that you can think through. It is certainly something that you just have to allow it to move through you, and you figure out how that will express itself. But ultimately, my point is that these energies aren't dictating what happens to us. They're giving us an opportunity to allow them to move through us so we can choose our path forward in a way that's more aligned with our dharmic purpose. So it's about intentionality, and it's about self-care, because you've got to take care of yourself in order to help take care of others. So it's a time to be, very internally focused, and don't forget to take care of your inner needs and take care of yourself, because Earth is a tough school.
It is. And this weekend, I mentioned earlier, that is a great opportunity because it's very auspicious for us to spend time listening, deep inner listening, being quiet. Many people may be on a silent retreat for the day, or a gentle or hard fast. Something that brings us into clarity, gives us the opportunity. I sometimes will say, will you just stop the world? I'd like to get off for a minute. And we can do that in our lives. Yes, the job will still be there. The family will still be there. All those things are not going away if we choose to stop the world for a short time and come into being. Thank you for mentioning the watch the sky, go out and get to know the planets. And my astrology class that you joined, it's been a couple years ago at least, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Time is
and yeah.
flying by.
And
Yeah.
when I think about that, that was probably one thing that if someone needed to hear it again, I did repeat that if you are interested in the energies of the universe, it's part of our environment, by the way. I mean, Earth is not this isolated entity. We are part of a much, much larger system. And if astrology is something that piques your interest and you're a little bit curious, comment, email, we'll figure it out and go down that path. there'll be some things coming up in the future that I'll mention that I'm maybe bringing back some of those classes for people that might like to get started or maybe want to go a little deeper. But as you were talking about self-care, it brought to mind something you and I were talking about before we started today, and that is we have another bonus coming up
Next week.
next week. And it will be similar, but not quite exactly the same as our last bonus, which was Ravi's Kundalini, Kriya, and meditation, and sound healing that I generated at the moment. And this time it will be also a different type of self-care. So know that we'll be doing a little bit of that at some point. So
Giving,
stay tuned. Mm-hmm.
yeah, providing opportunities for practice. You know, you mentioned stopping the world. For one thing, just turn off social media for the day, or any news outlet. I know, I enjoy scrolling through social media platforms because, I get laughs, and then you get news items, and you get a million different perspectives. And I was realizing at some point, okay, this is taking me down a rabbit hole. I need to just step away for a minute, turn it off, realize I was getting exposed to things that were setting me off. And I'm like, okay, time to take a break. And I know we all encounter that. But yeah, this weekend with the new moon on tomorrow, what time is that happening?
And the new moon actually will be after the dark moon. I know we collectively call new moon that time when the moon is dark, but from a Vedic calendar perspective, they're really defined differently. So dark moon ends at 1:51 tomorrow. And then new moon begins shortly after that. That's when the moon becomes new again, starts to reflect the sun's light. And British or Vedic astrology talks about the science of light. And getting out to see the sky, you get to see the light. And you experience the energies of each of those lights. We know if we sit next to a fireplace or a bonfire or a campfire or a candle, that light has a different radiance depending on the quality, the source, and what's feeding it. The planets have light and the stars have light. We know that. We see the sky. Maybe not as much as we could if we're in a city, but we know it's there. And each one of those lights shine on us differently, from a different angle, a different perspective, lighting up different things that occurred in our birth chart that give us an opportunity to have that free will choice about where it might be an influence or an impact. So those lenses that we view the light through are the lenses that are built from karma. They're also created from our perspective, which again is karmic. And so we can accept or avoid anything that comes our way. If it's meant for us, though, it may be a bit persistent, like you mentioned your sati sati, and that sometimes this is what we signed on for, and avoiding it is not an option.
The
And
only way out is through, and and that's where practice can carry you. Use your practice to burn through that, because sometimes it is, I mean, you can burn through it before you meet it, but that takes a consistent and high level of practice, a high level of commitment. We talked about devotion and discipline last week, and those are so key. It doesn't stop after a month or a week or a year or whatever it may be. it's an on, yoga, I think we've come to think of in the West as a set of movements that you practice. It's so much more than that. It is a lifestyle. It is a way of life, more than a lifestyle. It's a way of living. And if you stay devoted and disciplined to that lifestyle, yeah, you can burn through karma more quickly. When you do meet it, you can choose dharma more easily. But it's still going to come at you. It's still going to happen. This is the Earth School. This is what we're here for. So, give yourself grace as you go through these times. I think we'll probably have to wrap it up, but I hope everybody. Thank you, first of all, for joining us. And I hope you found a glimmer of hope in today's messages. And not just, it's not all doom and gloom. We will get through it. Everybody else, has. And we will get through it.
Yeah. And your practice recommendations are always right there on point. And I think of practice as part of my hygiene, where I am cleansing, purifying, finding challenges, discerning, doing all of that work that sometimes is really joyful and sometimes is not so pleasant. However, it's part of, as you said, being on the Earth School. And so I also would like to thank everyone for being with us today, and again invite you to ask questions, get in touch with us, comment, ring the bell, subscribe, share. I have to say thank you to all of you who have been sharing our videos, because we see that the videos are expanding and meeting new people. And thank you for all of that. Thank you for sharing.
And being here with us, because that's why we started these conversations in the first place, is to bring people together to think about how we perceive and move through our collective. So having you on board on this journey is such an honor. So to any and all of you, thank you so much for listening and for being here with us consistently, and certainly write into us anytime at consciouseyes108@gmail.com, or just comment and let us know how you're doing and how you're getting through it, because something that you may be helpful to someone else, because we all need each other through these challenging, unprecedented times, at least for us. So
our community is our idea factory, and let's generate some creativity.
Absolutely. So thank you again, and Sat Nam.
Namaste.